Watching the marketplace, time for the Joy Business Advisory Series. In the last couple of days, we've been tackling financial planning, and creating a budget is one of the things that came up in our discussions on planning your finances for 2024. Well, today we're going to discuss effective budgeting from the individual perspective in a tight economy. Happy to welcome Dennis Brown, Senior Manager, Financial Advisory at Deloitte Ghana. Thank you so much for coming to us. It's been a year, right? I mean, the last time we spoke in studio was a year, but I remember that we spoke on Zoom. So let's start with a definition of what a budget is and why it is crucial for financial planning from an individual perspective.
Okay. I mean, in its simplest form, a budget can be defined as a piece of financial document that estimates one's income and expenses, or expected income and expenses. That is in its simplest form. This is what is typically applicable to individuals, but in a more sophisticated manner, the budget can also be used to estimate one's assets, liabilities, net worth, and cash flows. So you can create a budget that is that sophisticated if you are pursuing a particular kind of goal.
So walk us through the key steps for drawing up a budget.
Okay. All right. So one of the mistakes individuals make when they are drawing up a budget is not to take stock of their financial situation and personal economy. And all they do is just look forward and say, well, I want to achieve this financial goal this year, and so I'm setting out a budget to take me there. Normally, such things becomes just wishful thinking. What you want to do is to assess and take stock of your financial situation. What are your assets? What are your liabilities? What are your mandatory expenses, if you have any of them? What are your income sources and the amount of income that you're able to generate from those? Once you understand your financial situation, which you can also say is your personal economy, you're in a very good position to target properly what you want to achieve with a budget. So that's the first thing you'd want to do. The other thing, or the next thing, will be to look at the general macroeconomy. You operate within an economy. It's not everything that you can control. There are things that you spend money on that you simply cannot control. Prices will go up and you can't do anything about it. So it's important that you look at the macroeconomy and see what's going on, understand and appreciate what is happening in the macroeconomy, and factor that into your budget, so that when you are projecting for particular expense items what you are likely to spend on, you'll be able to do so properly. You may want to also move further deeper from the macroeconomy, and if there's information available to relate what is happening to the market to you. For instance, there's headline inflation maybe expected to be about 15% in the coming year, but you may be in a situation where you spend about 70% of your income on food. Food inflation is not exactly 15%. So if you are going to persist in that situation, you would want to move further down from the headline inflation to look at Ghana Statistical Service, data on what food inflation is, so that you can properly, target. At the end of the day, you want to end up with a budget that is achievable, that is realistic. And that's why I
was going to come to a realistic budget and what the considerations should be in drawing up a realistic budget.
Yeah, and so some of it I've already stated, because if you don't start off from what your current financial situation is, and indeed any other known facts that may play out in the near future. I'll give you an example. So your current financial situation, you may know it. Now you want to budget, but your wife may be pregnant now, and you're expecting a new addition to the family in the next 5 months. You would have to take account of that. The baby has not arrived yet, but you would have to take account of that because you are planning for a set time period. So being able to assess your current financial situation, what may play out, facts that may play out in the coming 12 months, is very good. It puts you in a position to properly target. Again, understanding the macroeconomic environment is key. As I've indicated, you can't just project things based on what you wish it will be. You have to project based on what the market is telling you is likely to happen, and all of that goes to ensure that the budget that you end up with, it's a realistic one.
Doesn't matter what you end at the end of the month, because people have the excuse that, well, I don't earn much, so I don't need to create a budget.
I think it's even more critical if you don't earn much to cultivate the habit of budgeting, because if you don't earn much, you'd want to...
Or I earn too much, so I don't need to budget.
If you earn too much too and you don't do it, you are likely to end up being very wasteful. Even the Dangotes and the McDonald's, they tell you they do their budgeting, and that's why they are where they are now, because they try to encourage judicious use of resources. That's one thing that a budget does. So if you don't earn much, you'd want to ensure you cultivate the habit of drawing up a budget and committing to the budget. It's a difficult thing to commit to a budget, but you would have to scale that to be able to get by and make a good use of your resources.
So what next after drawing up the budget?
Now, after drawing up the budget, it's important you don't leave it somewhere in your cupboard for it to collect dust if it's a hard copy budget. But typically these days we don't have that. You might have some Excel documents where you documented things. You need to regularly revisit it. What you want to do is now track your actual spending and what is actually coming in terms of your earnings as against what you budgeted for, and see at regular intervals how you're doing. You may want to do it monthly, as an individual, because you're not going to take monitoring budget as a whole career or profession, or so nobody's paying you. But at least once a month, you may want to monitor how you're performing when you take your actual expenses and actual earnings as against the budget, and see whether there are some adjustments to make. Let me throw in a tip here. It's very important to note, particularly for individuals, flexible budgets are more effective compared to static budgets. Static budgets are the ones that you put there and say, I'm not going to touch it till end of year and then I'll check. But at various times of the year, things may be happening in the market that you just didn't have control or didn't know of from the beginning of the year, which is when you would have calibrated your budget. So you could be saying that, well, I expect inflation to be 20%. Then 2 months down the line, something happens, inflation is around 50%. You should be able to go back to your budget and recalibrate them. Other than that, your budget in the middle of the way is already off, and you're still trying to achieve something that is not achievable. So it's important to ensure that your budgets are flexible. You can revisit them based on the times that you are in and adjust. And you can really do that by regularly monitoring your budget.
We just have about 45 seconds. You earlier talked about committing to a budget. I want you to share some tips on that. And what are some of the mistakes we make that affect our ability to stick to our budgets?
Okay, when our budget is not realistic, when it's all born down to our desire to drive a Benz at the end of the year, and so we are just going for it. I'm earning 100,000 a year. It will take me maybe 500,000 to buy a Benz, and so I'm just projecting. That's the biggest mistake. No, it has to be something that is realistic. Tips for committing to your budget. The first thing I would say is, find like-minded persons that you can, go along on that journey with. You can share tips with. Sometimes ideas can come from anywhere. You may be paying so much for entertainment. Meanwhile, there could be other, alternatives for, getting cheaper. The same. And also always remind yourself of the bigger picture, the goal.
All right.
As you get along.
We'll be having you back tomorrow, I think. Dennis Brown, Senior Manager at Advisory Services.
Financial Advisory
Services, Ghana. Appreciate your time, and that's the one.